Hi everyone. Welcome to another Q&A live with me, Shakina. I'm here for the next 60 minutes to answer all of your OET questions. The format for this session is really simple. All you need to do is post your questions in the chat. So if you're joining on Facebook, put them into the comment section. Um, and if you're joining on YouTube, again, the comment section, those questions you know, uh, get transferred to me here, and I can see them all coming up. And I'll try my best to go through as many of them as possible in the next 60 minutes. So we've already got some questions in the chat, and I'm going to pick up the first one just here, posted a little bit before our session started. And this is from Tutien, who joins us on YouTube. Tutien's asking, in writing and listening, are missed hyphens in hyphenated words marked incorrect? And can I use the term heart attack in my letter, or is it considered a colloquialism? So, for the first question, there are two parts, which is hyphenated words in writing and listening. So, I'll start with writing. Um, Hyphenated words are part of punctuation, and punctuation is one part of the language criterion in the writing assessment criteria. So, so as you can tell, hyphenated words are really one part, a really tiny part um, of an entire criterion. And so when you're thinking about hyphenated words, don't panic about whether you're getting them right or wrong. First of all, like I said, they're only one part. Um, and uh, of course, writing the language criterion is testing your grammar, your vocabulary, your punctuation. But remember that it's only one part. So you don't need to get too worried about hyphenated words. If you find that there's something that you're struggling with and you don't understand the rules around hyphenation, maybe go back and do some study around that. A good dictionary can also give you some basic rules, can tell you what words are hyphenated generally or not, but it's not something that you need to be really worried about. um, and the second one is listening. So in listening, there is a little bit more flexibility compared to reading, in the way that you're marked. So there is flexibility, and with high again with this is something, it would depend on the word, but again with listening, focus on getting the spelling right. uh, Focus on spelling the word right, making sure you're adding, if it has a plural, eyes, you're not forgetting that. You're listening carefully for that. So those are areas where candidates often make mistakes, not so much with hyphenated words. So again, that's not something that you need to be very worried about. um, Your second question is, can you use the term heart attack in your letter, or is it considered colloquialism? You absolutely can use the word heart attack in your letter if it's something that, it depends on your reader. If your reader is obviously someone um, uh, outside of a speciality that would understand the medical term myocardial infarction, then yes, you definitely should use the word heart attack. But you can use it anyway. It's not going to. It's not a colloquialism as such. So with that, think about your reader. Think about what would be more familiar to them. Would the medical term be more familiar? Would the other term, the lay term heart attack, be familiar? So depending on that, make your choice and use one in your letter. Right. I have got another question, again from Tutien, asking about medication. Is specifying complete medication dosages for secondary chronic conditions like diabetes or hypertension? Are they considered irrelevant or relevant? With medication, you really need to think about whether your reader needs to know, um, whether your reader is involved in any aspect of care that involves the medication. So, yes, if they are, for example, if they're monitoring medication, definitely. And if it is a, an issue which surrounds, and it affects these conditions, yes, you do need to mention the medication. Um, and again, depending on the request, the dosages as well. So it really depends on the request. There's no blanket rule that you must mention medication dosages for primary conditions or secondary conditions. You need to think about what the task is asking you to do, what is the purpose of the letter, what's the reader's role in the care of the patient, and then make your decision based on that. All right. I've got a question here from William. William joins us on YouTube, and William's asking, what is the maximum percentage of a young patient's body to which calcitrol may be applied? So, this is the question. And then, should we include the sign percentage in the answer, like 10% or just 10? So, yes, you would need to include the sign, because that sign is, if translated, is percent. It's not percentage. So yes, you would need to include the sign. I'm going to post a link to a video in the chat, which is a really great video that goes into a bit more detail about how you should answer reading part A questions. And it talks about this very question with a little bit more explanation. So I would highly recommend you watch that video. Um, and I'm just posting it in the chat right now. So after the session, do go and watch the video. Okay, I've got lots of questions coming in, which is great. I've got a question here from Shani on Facebook. Shani's asking, if we write uh, deformity, but the spelling is a Y. Uh, so if we write TE, but the spelling is TY, will it be cut or not in listening party? So, Shani, as I explained earlier, there is flexibility with listening party, but you should really aim for accuracy. And especially with words that are commonly known to both medical professionals and lay people. So, if you think about the word deformity, it's actually a word that everyone would know, right? The expectation would be that you would need to spell that accurately with the Y, and not with the E at the end. So I would encourage you to focus on spelling accurately rather than and working on areas where you have some difficulty with spelling words, is like endings of words. Work on those areas and make sure you spell as accurately as possible. Dr. Yumna on YouTube's asking, can we use a slash if we think two answers are correct in listening party? So no, you can't. You must choose only one answer. If as your final answer, if you have both the answers, and even if one of them is correct, it will be marked incorrect because the assessors really don't know which one is your final answer. Berry on YouTube's asking, must we always write within the word limit, especially in cases where the case notes are less or more? So, Berry, I just want to comment a little bit on the last part of your question, especially about the case notes. If you're using official case notes, the length of the case notes um, is the same. It's more or less the same. You're going to not see a lot of variation with the length of the case notes. So if you're finding and practicing material where sometimes case notes are, shorter, um, or longer, that probably means they're unofficial materials. And one of the things that happens with practicing with unofficial materials is that they give you an incorrect idea of the test, and you practice with those. But when you go on into your test on test day, the actual test is, really different from what you've practiced. So remember, always practice with official material, and all case notes are standardized in the sense of the length. They're going to be the same length. um, you should aim to write within the word limit, which is 180 to 200 words. The word limit, however, is a guide. It's there to help you. It's there to help you understand whether you've written too much, you've included all the relevant information, maybe you've added too much or too less. If your word count is going below 180, it probably means you haven't added all the relevant information. If it's going above, it means probably you've added some irrelevant information. So that's how you should think about word count. Assessors aren't counting the words, they're counting the information. So think about it in that way. I'm going to post an article in the chat, which is from um, our Ready page, which talks exactly about this question, and I am going to. So yeah, that's for reference. It's a really good blog that will explain this in a bit more detail. Johnson saying, can we repeat words from the question in the short answer section of reading part A? So, Johnson, no, you should avoid repeating words or using synonyms of words from the question in the short answer section. That's because with reading part A, you're being tested on your accuracy and preciseness, which is really important when you're looking for information in your workplace, right? You need, if you're doing a task at work, your colleague asks you a question. Um, um, so, for example, if they ask you how many milligrams of the painkiller do I need to administer, you would, and if it's 8, you would say 8, right? You would be precise. And that's the idea with reading part A, is you're just being precise. You're giving the information that is asked, nothing more. So repeating words from the question is is um, is not a great demonstration of being precise and accurate, and therefore it would be wrong. I just posted earlier in the chat, if you scroll up, a really good video about preciseness and accuracy in reading part A. So I'd encourage you to watch that video um, uh, to find out a little bit more in detail what it's all about. All right. So I am going to continue with some more questions. So Insomnic on YouTube's asking, is there a difference between the OET nursing and medicine exams? Some people claim that the exams will be tougher when only medicine and nursing exams are administered. So there is, there are a lot of rumors and sort of myths floating around on social media. Um, One of them is that the administration of the test, where you have nursing and medicine, is easier or more difficult than the other one where you have all the professions. So the reality is that there's absolutely no difference. OET is a standardized test. And what that means is that we've had to demonstrate to regulators around the world that our test is fair, and it provides all candidates a fair opportunity to demonstrate their language skills, no matter when they take the test or where they take the test. You could be taking your test in July, you could be taking your test in December, the first administration of the month in a paper based test, or the second, it doesn't matter. We've had to demonstrate to regulators that our test is absolutely fair. And, and as I said, you have equal opportunity to demonstrate your language whenever you take the test. So there's absolutely no truth to that. Right. I am just scrolling down for some newer questions. All right, I have got a question here from Omar, and Omar's on YouTube asking what are the common mistakes in reading. And Omar, I think you're saying that you're a doctor. Um, so I think if we, there are three parts to reading: part A, part B, and part C. With each of these parts, there's different skills being tested, and the way that you sort of approach each of these paths is different. So, one, first of all, I think one common mistake would be that candidates often don't understand what each part of the reading test is assessing and how your approach to the questions should change from part A, part B to part C. Um, and if we talk about just overall, the second thing I think is not practicing for enough time, or not reading for long enough with the kind of concentration you need, and that means you're not really building your stamina to read for a full 1 hour with absolute concentration. So those are two overall sort of mistakes. um, I think with perhaps what I can do is get into part B, and then talk a little bit about part C as well with that. And then if we have some questions about part A, I'll talk about those a bit later. So just to go back to part B, like I said, um, with part B, it's important to remember that each question is different from the other. So if you haven't done so well with one question, you shouldn't be too worried. Take the next question as a fresh question. It's completely different, and approach it that way. Similarly, with part C, um, you'll see that it's very easy to find which part of the text the question's from in part C, because the question stem will clearly indicate which paragraph where you need to look. So with both these parts, you can actually approach the questions quite individually. Again, with both parts B and C, when you're working with multiple choice questions, it's a good idea not just to look at why an answer is right, but also look at um, why you think the other answers are wrong. And developing this habit of eliminating and looking for evidence for why other answers are wrong in your preparation is going to really train your brain to think that way when you're doing the test, and it's going to increase um, your understanding of the text first of all, and also the likelihood that you're selecting the right answer. And finally, reading the sentence or the sentences where you think the answer is more than once is a good idea, because you're not just looking for keywords. So that's a really common mistake a lot of candidates make is they see some words in the question, or some synonyms, and then they try and match the word and the sentence, and they think that's how they find the answer. No, you really need to understand the meaning, especially in parts B and C. And so don't word match, don't try and word spot, try and think about the meaning while you're answering the questions. Great. All right. Okay. I have a lot of questions coming in about listening. So another one on listening, part A. I think I might have covered it earlier, but if the answer is afternoon and the real answer is afternoons, would it be correct? Hasita, that would not be correct, because it's a different word. Um, in the sense, there is a difference between one afternoon and afternoons. Like I said earlier, it's a good idea to focus on really listening to words, especially endings is an area where a lot of candidates make mistakes, and so paying attention to that is important. All right, I am just looking for some newer questions. Okay, I've got a question here from Chaturika on Facebook. Chaturika is asking, what happens if I miss some relevant information when writing the letter? Will it be a reason to reduce my marks? So, as I said earlier, the assessors are looking at the information the relevant information that you include, to check to see if it's sufficient, if all of the information that the reader needs to continue care for the patient is there in your letter. So if you think about it, missing out on information that your reader needs to know will impact the care of the patient in real life. And the way that this is assessed in OET writing, if you're looking at any of the assessment criteria, is not to reduce marks. There aren't any marks that are reduced or cut. What the assessors are doing is they're looking at your performance in that criterion, and they're giving you a band score. So they're looking at so when you read the assessment criteria, they're description of your performance. So when you're thinking about your some information that you've missed, um, don't it's not something to panic or worry about. Think about how important was that information for the reader to know. Was it really key? Was it critical? Was it nice to know? And so if you think about it that way, you'll feel a little bit less stressed. And reading the assessment criteria will also help you understand how the assessors what they're really looking at when they are looking at that content criterion. So they're not reducing or cutting marks if you miss out on something. They're really looking at your performance overall. I'm going to post into the chat the link to our writing page, which has the assessment criteria. As you scroll down the page, you'll find it there. And I would encourage you to have a look and download it. We also have a great resource, which is called the Writing Guide. Now, you'll find that on the same page that I shared. It's a free PDF that you can download. And what I'm going to do is maybe just open up and share that with you right now so you can see the page and you can see where to find the writing guide. So I'm going to take your question off for a second there. And so hopefully you can see what I am sharing. You can see the writing page. And as you scroll down, you've got your guide to the writing subtest. When you click this, it will open up our guide. And the guide has got all the assessment criteria. So I'm just going to, so you've got all the 6 assessment criteria, and you've got explanations about each of them so you understand what they mean. You've got sorry there, we had a little bit of a technical snag, but I am back. Hopefully, you can hear and see me. All right, so we were looking at some questions, and I've picked out this one from Word on Facebook. What's asking, when you're doing the role play, will marks be deducted if I don't use synonyms? And I just stick to the phrases exactly as they are in the tasks. Um, so what the assessors are looking for when you um, are doing your role play, they're looking at two sets of criteria, right? They're looking at your clinical communication, uh, that's under the clinical communication criteria, and they're also looking at the linguistic criteria. And so, with the linguistic criteria, what you're asking falls under, again, one part of the linguistic criteria. And the idea with speaking, um, and the words that you use, um, or the phrases that you use, you shouldn't be worried about showing off your language to the assessor. They're actually more interested in how you're communicating with the patient. Are you demonstrating the clinical communication criteria? Things like active listening, things like good questioning skills, using open questions where you need to gather information from the patient, and then using closed questions when you, say, for example, want to confirm some bits of information. They're looking at how you're providing explanations, how you're exploring the patient's perspective and what their feelings are. So that's covered, all of those things, under the clinical communication criteria. And then under the linguistic criteria, they are looking at your resources of grammar and expression. That's where they would look at how you've used sort of language that is natural, um, and it really, you don't really need to worry if you use the words from the roll card. That's absolutely fine. They're there to help you. It's really how you put those words into sentences, and in a way that is clear for your patient, it's suitable and appropriate for your patient, and using those clinical communication skills. So there's a lot that goes into the assessment criteria. There's a lot of things that the assessors are looking at. They're not just looking at whether you've used paraphrasing or not. They're really there to see your communication skills. So don't worry. You can use words from the task card if you need to. I'm going to share in the chat the speaking page. Now, the speaking page is just like our writing page, and it has there are two really useful guides. You've got your guide to speaking part one. Part one looks at the linguistic criteria, and your guide to speaking part two, which looks at the clinical communication criteria. So, and then again, you can download both of those. They're absolutely free, and they've got lots of examples, lots of audio as well, so live examples. You can listen and understand what each criterion is about, and see how you can improve your score in that. So I would recommend downloading the guides, and learning more about how speaking is assessed. All right. All right, I'm just looking for some newer questions. All right, so I've got some questions on resources. So I'm going to pick up this question from Chidima. And Chidima is asking, what's the best textbook to use for test preparation? So there are a lot of OET preparation materials out there. on our OET store. So I'm going to post the link into this into the chat for OET store, and on the store you'll find two kinds of materials. All of them are great. So there's not one single single book. There are a variety, and it really depends on what you're looking for. um, so there are free materials and there are paid materials. The free materials, for example, your intro to OET course, which is great course that gives you the basics. It explains, really helps you understand what goes, what's behind why reading part A is the way it is. And that really helps you put yourself in the right frame of mind to approach the task well. So you have lots of free materials like that. And then you have paid materials. I would recommend our skills courses. So you've got your writing skills course, listening, speaking, and reading. Each of those skills courses have lots of fresh material to practice from and lots of tips as well. So I would recommend those. And like I said, I'm just going to put into the chat our link to the OET store. So maybe go through the store and have a look at the different resources. As I said, there are free ones and paid ones, and see what you like. All right. I've got um, I've got a question from Hi on YouTube. In writing, if no date is given, what date to write? What date to be right? So again, with writing, and especially with practicing different kinds of case notes and materials, it's important to practice with official ones. If all official case notes will have a date. So if you find that some case notes don't have a date, that probably means they're not official case notes. And um, I just shared the link to the store. So go to the store, have a look, and see some. All of the materials on there are official. They've been checked, and they're going to give you the best idea of what the test is like. Okay, I've got a question here from Amal on YouTube saying, "What's the easiest way to do reading part A? Most of my mistakes are in that part, so how do I manage my time well?" So, with reading part A, I've got some tips here. So, I'm going to take your question off. And um, the first step is to actually go through the questions in order. So, starting with the matching questions and working your way through the rest of them in order. The matching questions are designed to help you just get to know the texts, right? You might spend the first minute or so just looking at the headings. Um, and really, while you're doing that, you can answer the matching questions because they help you they help you understand what are the texts about. um, the second thing is to use the features of the text. So by features we mean the headings, the subheadings. If you have a table, look at the row headings and the column headings. If you have information that is in bold, look at that. um, Bullet points, look at maybe the first word of the bullet point. So these are text features that are going to help you quickly find the answers. You don't need to read from left to right every single word. When you're doing reading part A, your eyes should be going really all over the place looking at these different features, and your brain is getting a sense of what these texts are about. um, so that is the second tip. With the third tip, it's actually to make sure that you have copied the answer exactly as it is. Make sure your spelling is accurate. You can This is often one area where people get waste marks. So spending that couple of extra seconds is really worth it. And then with the last step is not to panic about time. Now that's easier said than done. But with reading part A, maybe you start off practicing without a time limit. Okay, just do the task. As you do the task, you'll understand how to do it, what skills you need. And then once you feel comfortable with that, slowly reduce the time down to 15 minutes. So that will also really help take away some of that anxiety. Um, I've got a question here from Nurse in Blue, saying if I'm writing the answer and listening without the article, so electrocardiogram without an, so without the article, will it affect the marks? So articles are optional in listening part A. You don't need to worry about whether you've put them or not. If you go to our sample tests on our website and look at the answer keys for any of the sample tests, you'll see that optional words are indicated in brackets. And if they're in brackets, that means you don't need to worry about them. They're optional, and articles are optional. Just scrolling through to look at some of the questions coming in. Okay. Mm, I've got a question here from Emo on YouTube asking, how do we read part A if it contains just long sentences without headings and subheadings? So, with reading part A, the kind of texts that you're going to find are everyday texts that you refer to at work to complete tasks. For example, if you're treating a patient, the patient's in front of you, you might check a dosage chart. You might check medication information for indications, contraindications. You might check your treatment pathway to see what's the next step in the line of treatment. Those are the kinds of things that you will encounter in reading part A. And the reason why it's timed with that time limit is not because we want to make it harder. It's because when you read those kinds of texts in real life, you're actually quickly looking for information. You don't have a lot of time to read every sentence, every word of every sentence. You need to find the information quickly. So, um, what I'm trying to say is that if you find a reading part A text that just all the four texts are just long sentences without headings and subheadings, it's likely that those aren't official materials. Um, those are just those are unofficial, because in reading part A you will always find these kinds of text features, because that is the nature of the texts that you read in reading part A. All right. So I'm just going to scroll and make sure I've got as many of the questions that have come in earlier as possible. I've got a question here from Berry on YouTube asking, what's the number of acceptable paragraphs in writing? So, Berry, with Writing, there is no set number of paragraphs that are acceptable. You can write really any number of paragraphs. What the assessors are looking for in the organization and layout criterion, that's the criterion that covers the aspect of paragraphs. um, what they're looking for is that you have presented the information in a way that is logical and clear to the reader, that is going to help them find the important information quickly. um, so that is really the focus of that criterion. And you might choose to have written all of that, and you might find you might have done all of that, and you have 3 paragraphs or you have 5 paragraphs. It really doesn't matter. They're really looking at how you've presented the information in a way that is that your reader can find it quickly and understand what's happening. um, I've got a question here from Tutiand on YouTube, with a whole list of different words. We call them connectors. And I'm going to put into the chat a really helpful article that answers that question. And it's actually got almost all of those examples there that you've cited, Tutian. So I would encourage you to have a look at that article, and I've just posted it in the chat. All right. Um, just looking for some newer questions now. I've got a question here from ATPL. Should the clinical stuff given to the patient be 100% correct? So, with OET, whether you're taking the speaking test or the writing test, you need to, and of course, with listening and reading, but in speaking and writing, you are, of course, producing language. So, with any part of OET, it's important to understand that we're not testing medical knowledge. We are testing your language, your communication skills. And so you will never be tested on your medical knowledge. If with speaking, for example, if you've got something that you say that might not be 100% medically correct, that's absolutely fine. You're not going to be marked. That's not even going to be looked at. It's about how you're communicating. With writing, yes, you need to be accurate according to what is in the case notes. So you can't change that. You can't interpret that. You can't make a diagnosis. You don't need to do any of that. All you need to do is to present the information accurately to your reader. So there's a little bit of a difference there, but overall, the principle is the same. We're not testing your medical knowledge, we're testing your language skills. Um, just looking for a few. Another question here from Berry. So, do I introduce myself with the first and last name or either of them? You can introduce yourself with just your first name. That's absolutely fine. That is often sort of the way that people introduce them in English speaking, themselves in English speaking countries in a healthcare context. It's generally the first name, and generally the same applies to a patient. They're absolutely fine with you using their first name, unless unless you ask them their name and they say something else. Then that's what you call them. But yeah, a first name is absolutely fine. um, So I have got right. I'm going to um, pick up this question on reading part C from F on YouTube, and they're saying, you they get down to two options, and they're stuck between two options. So what tips can you follow? So I've got, I think, just the tip that will help. So I'm going to talk about reading part C, but you can actually apply the same to part B as well. And, of course, the first tip there is to manage your time. But let's just hold on to that for a second. Let's look at the second tip, which is to find evidence for all the options. If you're getting stuck between two, um, perhaps you haven't found the evidence for all of the for those two, and so I would encourage you to actually go to the text and try and find all the evidence. It might take a bit of time when you're practicing, but that's absolutely fine. It's something you'll get used to. The third tip there is actually what I want to focus on for what you've just described. Um, Often when you so the tip there is to actually answer the question without looking at the answer options first. So read the question, cover the answer options, don't look at them, go to the text, and try and find the answer from the text. Now, when you do this, what you're doing is actually you're just purely focusing on the meaning of the text. When you've grasped the meaning of the text in your head really well, then when you look at the options, you're not going to be confused by them as much. You're going to know this is what the text means, and this is the answer option that matches it. So try that a little bit, and you'll find that you'll get better at it, and not be confused within the options, because when you look at the answer options before you read the text, that's when you can get confused. All right. All right, I've got a question here from Oluka, and Oluka is asking, when writing to an endocrinologist, what information is relevant? um, so with different readers, um, and when you're thinking about the writing test, you might think, okay, well, this is a letter to an endocrinologist, so I shouldn't include social history, or I should include medication. Okay, this is a letter to a respiratory specialist, so I need to make sure I include all the information about lungs, for example. So this is one way that candidates often think about the letter, but it's not really the best way to think about the letter, because yes, there are different readers, and yes, you should definitely think about the reader, but what you also need to think about is why you are writing to them, the purpose of the letter, and the patient's unique case. Each letter is going to be different. Each because if you think about it, there are no you know, there are no two cases of patients that are exactly the same, right? That's true in real life, and that's true in the writing test as well. So when you approach the test, approach it being flexible. Look at the reader, yes, that'll help you, but also look at the purpose for writing, why you're writing, what's the person's role in that specific case. um, and the writing guide I shared earlier in the chat, you know, have a look at the content chapter. That will really go into the detail and help you understand what information is relevant. Okay, we have got time for maybe a couple more questions, and I have got a question here from Krishnan on YouTube, saying if it's a known case, how do we address the issue of the word requirement? Um, is Do we need to include only the relevant new data that's there in the case notes? So, Krishnan, I'm going to point you to a wonderful resource that we have on our blog, which really talks about you know what you need to think about when you're writing, when your case notes indicate that there's an existing relationship in place, um, which is what you mean by known case. So I'm just going to put that in the chat right now for you. And it's a wonderful article, and I would encourage you to have a look at that. Right, maybe we've got one more question. All right. Got a question here. Um, I'm going to pick a question here about speaking. And this is from F again on YouTube, saying, if the task says to examine the patient, do we really need to examine the interlocutor? So, no, you don't need to. Generally, your task is going to start after you have examined the patient, if it involves examination. So, you'll say, the task will say something, you have just examined the patient, and you proceed with the kind of part of that consultation which happens after the examination. Or it could be, you know, you're going to show the patient something, at the end of it you might examine them, but there's nowhere really in the task that you will need to get up and examine the interlocutor. um, if you're coming across some of those kinds of tasks, which give you the impression that you need to examine the interlocutor literally, probably you probably need to think about whether they're actually official tasks or not. Official, I would encourage you to go to the website and have a look at the tasks that are about examination there, and those are the kinds of tasks that you will find in your test as well. All right, so we have come to the end of this Q&A session. Thank you for all of your questions. We you know, love answering them, and they are important to us. So if your question hasn't been answered today, you know, you can always go to our Facebook page, and in our Facebook Messenger, put in your question and you will receive a reply from the education team within 24 hours. So go there, post your question there. This is the last Q&A for this year. We will be back in January. So look out on our Facebook and YouTube channels. Subscribe so that you kept posted on when we're going to resume in the new year. If you're looking to prepare in during the holidays, if you're taking some time off, or maybe you're not taking some time off from your busy schedule, our OET Ready page is a great place where you can find wonderful resources that are going to continue to support you. We have our study guide, for example, that is a great downloadable free resource, gives you just steps you through the each part of the test. That's a great resource to share as to download as well. So I'm going to post into the chat. I'm going to be posting in the Ready page. This is the place where you can find all our resources in one place. Scroll down and have a look at the page. The study guide is there as well. All right. So thank you once again, and we'll see you in the new year. Bye, everyone.